Welcome to another episode of the Battlefields and Bourbon podcast, the podcast where we sit and sip, talk all things Civil War history and bourbon and whiskey. I'm Jack, joined as always by my co-host Elijah. Today we are coming to you from the historic Bell House in beautiful downtown Winchester, Virginia. The Bell House is preserved and maintained by the Shenandoah Valley Battlefields Foundation, managing entity of the Shenandoah Valley Battlefields National Historic District, and the official sponsor of the Battlefields and Bourbon podcast. If you like what you hear and you want to support the podcast, consider becoming a member of the Battlefields Foundation. Every dollar you give to support battlefield preservation here in the Shenandoah Valley, in turn, helps support the Battlefield and Bourbon podcast. Elijah.
Jack.
We're back.
Again.
Second to last episode of 2024.
Winding down. Year 2.
Yeah. Going into year 3, technically. Well, no.
Something like that.
I don't know. Time's weird when you start halfway through a calendar year. But here we are. Another episode. Our first episode here in December. We're super excited. We got an exciting episode. We got an exciting guest in the room. Jarred Marlowe's back. The man with 2 R's in his first name. He's in the room. The man, the myth, the legend from another episode we did where we talked about Danville and Martinsville and the end of the war. Yeah, the end of the war there. That's a great episode. If you haven't listened to that one, go and give it a listen. Jarred's from the Blue and Gray Education Society, as well as just a great historian in the world in general. So we're excited to have you back here in the studio, Jarred, to record another episode.
And he brings us whiskey.
Yeah, and you bring the booze.
Yeah, I always come bearing gifts.
Yeah. So what are we sipping on today, Elijah?
It's a new release from Ragged Branch Distillery, so our local Virginians will know that name, Ragged Branch down in Charlottesville. This is the J. Bumgardner's straight bourbon whiskey. They just released this back in October, and it's I don't want to call it a tribute to the original brand because this is the exact recipe that the original brand used back in the 1800s. Brand started in 1820 in Greenville, Virginia, and ran up until Prohibition before it was shut down, like a lot of distilleries across the country. But Mr. Toomey, the general manager of Ragged Branch, had mentioned that they wanted to revitalize that name as far as a Virginia brand. And I know we've personally discussed revitalizing Virginia brands, that sort of thing, to be discussed later. But yeah, no, they actually got with one of the descendants of Mr. Bumgardner and got the original family recipe and recreated it. And
Where's Greenville?
That's a good question.
Well, there is a Greenville, like, on I-81.
Oh, yeah. There is
It's a Shenandoah Valley.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I think the bottle says it's from Augusta County.
Yeah, so it's just south of Stanton.
And
Stewart's Draft.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's in the valley.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Augusta County, that's for Ragged Branch. That's where they're based out of.
Are they really?
Yeah, just near, right? Yeah. Never mind. I'm getting myself confused.
I think they're closer to
Charlottesville, but I think
closer
it's
to what we're talking about today.
Yeah.
But it's still close. I mean, those counties are close
they're like
to Virginia.
right.
Yeah, I think Greenville's on the other side of the county, though. Like, same county, though. Or, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's like you said, it's along the... So this is technically, if this was produced originally in Greenville, this is a Valley bourbon. I mean, a whiskey.
Is
this
yeah.
bourbon?
Yeah, it's bourbon.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a Virginia bourbon. I'm getting myself confused, not Albemarle County.
yeah, Augusta.
Yeah. But yeah, so this is produced by them, and it's just revitalizing an old brand. So I appreciate that they're doing that with the history side of things, because, you know,
They already poured.
Yeah, I already poured for an episode picture.
Great pop.
But still a good pop.
Solid.
Still a good pop. Yeah, the aroma of that one, as soon as you pull the cork, it's in the room. Permeates.
We haven't done Ragged Branch on an episode yet, have we?
We have not.
Yeah, no, we've...
have not.
Well, I think we've talked about it before, but it's...
Yeah,
this is cool. It's their typical bottle. I think this is their standard.
Yeah, same glass, just
but,
they put a
the stickers, the
label
label's great.
And apparently the label is actually, I think, pretty close to, if not the original label from back in the 1800s.
Yeah, I mean,
cool.
The label's got like a sketch of the distillery, which is awesome. Like a wagon rolling out with barrels in the back, got pigs running around. You got, the snake rail fencing in the background. That's super cool. Good job on them. Copyrighted Augusta County. This is awesome.
Yeah, no, that's if you're looking for a label like Jack, that's
that's
a label right there.
Well, so Jarred, so tell me how you picked this one up.
Yeah, I was going through my local ABC store, and I was literally on the way to checkout, and I turned, and the Virginia section was right there, and I literally just saw the label, and I was like, that looks like a cool bottle. So I just picked it up and grabbed it, and it was ironically October 1st, and that was the month that all of the local products were 20% off.
Oh.
So I got it 20% off. So I was like,
There you go.
I was like, even better, you know?
So that's, ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening, that's a good sign to just buy the bottle that looks cool sometimes, you know?
You never know what you'll get.
This label is nuts. I love this. It's so old school.
Yeah, no, that is awesome. I think that was a lot of what I saw people commenting on when it first dropped back in October, was just how unique the label was, and that drew people to it before they even realized that it was a Ragged Branch product. But once you see the bottle, you'll see it's the same glass that Ragged Branch uses for their other products and everything.
It's a straight bourbon whiskey.
I can't find a mash bill for it, obviously, because it's so new, but I'm sure that's probably a lock and key kept family recipe just to keep it unique. But I did see that it was aged, pretty sure 5 years at a minimum.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's got a nice color to it.
No, it's
Yeah, it does.
And 90 proof, so typical for a bourbon, around 90 proof, just for your regular shelf item. It does have that kind of
corny
corn, but like that, almost that musty
distillery.
note that the distillery smell in the glass.
Yeah, I mean, you smell that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, I was just at Devil's Due last week, and that smell hits you every time you go in there. So
Almost reminds me of like a ginger snap. If that one, like, I don't know if that's just fitting for the holiday season, but it kind of smells like a cookie almost. But
yeah, let's give it a sip. I try to swallow now away from the microphone because too many people have. Let it be known that our swallow is not the best thing to hear through your speaker. So we apologize for that, and we'll do better.
turn up the volume next time.
Yeah,
Just a little louder.
that's good. It's light and smooth right off the bat. That's a good sipper.
It is very light, especially for 90 proof, because there are some 90 proof bourbons. Not that that's high. There are some 90 proofs that don't go down as easy, but that's a nice, unique taste to it too. Like I said, it's got that kind of cookie smell, but also flavor to it, and very soft as well. I mean, it's not going to turn your mouth inside out or anything, or light you on fire.
Yeah, I'd love to know the mash bill of this, just for the sake of what were they doing back in 1820.
Yeah, and that's what I like so much about it, is just like, this is like bourbon in its purest, oldest form, more or less. I mean, you can do the argument of Kentucky and Virginia, who did it first, that sort of thing. But like, as far as old classic labels, that's one of them. But
Well, and I just love too that the whole, like, even on the back label, the whole description includes, that this is old straight bourbon whiskey. Like they use the word old repeatedly, which I think is really cool.
Just the wording on it and everything sounds like an 1800s
Sales pitch advertisement. Yeah.
Like the snake oil type of thing. I like it. I think it's cool.
There's a story online too of Bumgardner sending some samples of it to Washington College, which is now
Washington Lee.
Yeah, Washington Lee. And I guess it was like a chemistry professor there, like wrote him back and said, like, this is the perfect medicinal whiskey or something like that. Like,
yeah, it's medicine.
Like,
right.
like this is the perfect balance of everything for it to be perfect medicine. So
that's got his seal of approval, which I'm sure, I mean, if that was produced up until Prohibition, that label itself, that name, I'm sure soldiers in the Civil War would have gotten their hands on that.
yeah. And it's cool
at some point.
It's cool too to think, like, the people who that we're going to talk about, and y'all talk about, probably knew this brand.
Yeah.
And drank this exact whiskey.
That was in their local liquor store.
So yeah, I looked up Jeffrey Evan Auctions, which is an auction house in the Valley, sold 2 bottles, 2 glass flask. This is first quarter of the 20th century. Back in 2015 for $259, and I'm looking at that label, and it's the same label.
Oh,
so
really?
they must have just copied it exactly, and then just had someone edit it a little bit, but it's right on the money. We'll be sure to post the original label, and then we'll zoom in on this one because it's cool to see the comparison of the two.
Were those just empty bottles, or do they have whiskey still in them?
Yeah, I wish we did video podcasts, but here we go.
Oh,
like,
sweet.
So
that's cool.
It's like spot on. So we'll share that for you guys to see. That's awesome. I don't know how we've been so blind to this. Like
just Virginia brands, old
Virginia brands. We could just do, if we researched it, find episodes that just talk about that. We were focused on the Savage stuff back at Kernstown, which was cool, and that's the one we want to bring back. So if anybody has a Savage recipe from Kernstown, Virginia,
we've got our hands on the original jug, ceramic jug, the 1800s.
Yeah.
So,
but speaking of this,
Charlottesville,
Ragged Branch being there. Yeah. So Charlottesville, located in Albemarle County, Virginia. What are we talking about today, Jared?
Well, we're going to talk about one of the lesser known stories of the Civil War. And to me, it's one of the funniest stories of the Civil War. And I can say that because no one dies in this little quick skirmish. One person does get wounded, but it's not mortal. It's just a freak accident. And it's one of those stories that it's part of the bigger, it's a piece of the bigger puzzle, but it gets overlooked because it's embarrassing for its main figure. But it's just one of those pieces of history that people, drive by every day and don't know what happened right there. So, and the more I research it, the more fascinating it is. And I guess I've said all that without saying what we're talking about.
Yeah, so what are we talking about, Jared?
What are we talking about here?
So we're going to talk about George Custer and him engaging in a skirmish at Rio Hill, which is in northwest Charlottesville. It's
not in the New Mexico territory? Are you telling me? Rio Hill?
It's New Mexico by way of like Arkansas and Tennessee. And but yeah, this is, like I said, it's a lesser known story. If you look it up in the official Civil War records, Custer writes 2 paragraphs about the engagement, but that's it. There's no, videos online about it. There's no articles out there about it.
No battle map.
Yeah, there's no battle maps. It's a small thing, but to me, it's a pretty awesome story.
Yeah. So what got you into it, period? So how did this even come on to your plate for research and writing?
Well, my wife's family lives in Charlottesville, and we go visit them several times a year. And I was looking for Civil War things to do in Charlottesville because, I'm not one just to sit around all day and, just sit there and be bored. I was like, if I can go explore something, I'll do it.
Yeah.
So I literally just Googled Civil War in Charlottesville, Virginia, and this was the first thing that came up. It was a newspaper article about this skirmish. It wasn't even about the skirmish in general. It was about the signage that went around there. So I was like, I've never heard of this skirmish, but it involves one of the more famous generals in American history. So how have we not heard more about this? And I started pulling threads like historians do. And I even talked to a Custer expert, someone who leads Custer tours across the country. And they had never heard of this, or they had heard of it, but they had no idea anything about it. So I was like, well, here's a chance to, establish yourself and be the first person to write about this, to learn about this, and put
which
stuff
is
out
a
there.
rare thing to do for a historian. I mean, that's super rare nowadays,
especially with Civil War. Because everything's been almost beat to death.
Yeah.
So that was intriguing to me. Because like I said, nothing's out there. If you go to YouTube and type in Rio Hill, Charlottesville, there's one video of a guy who's walking around the shopping center parking lot, and he has a picture of the historical marker,
but there's no audio.
No, it's set to some weird piano music.
I watched that today.
Yeah,
in preparation.
It has a total of 63 views, and me and you were 2 of them.
Yeah,
apparently.
Viral.
So I guess this is a Battlefields and Bourbon exclusive. This is a brand new topic. So
yeah, you will not hear this on any other podcast.
That is
I
true.
guarantee it.
Or YouTube video.
Yeah. Yeah, this is true. This is the first audio about this that'll be on YouTube. So,
but that's what I like about this stuff is like we can bring attention to battles that people have never heard of. That's the cool part of this.
Yeah.
I mean, you can talk about your Gettysburgs and your Antietam's and your Manassas and all that, but like this is the stuff that I think is the coolest. Is the stuff that nobody's heard of.
Yeah. Right. So the Battle of Rio Hill, you call it a skirmish,
right?
At Rio Hill. You know, how do we get to this area, this region of Virginia, and what time frame are we looking at?
So the skirmish itself happened in February of 64, but to get there, we have to go back to Gettysburg, because after Gettysburg, Lee retreats back into Virginia, and George Meade does not pursue him, and that frustrates Lincoln, because that's been a thorn in Lincoln's side the whole war. Is his generals will beat Confederate forces, but they won't actively pursue them. Kind of the whole, if they're down, go ahead and wipe them out. So Meade, probably just because of the gravity of Gettysburg, doesn't chase after Lee, stays in Pennsylvania, and Lee retreats back into Virginia. And he's kind of hanging out northern Virginia, north central Virginia. And Meade eventually comes back down and establishes a defensive line south of D.C. It's kind of a barrier there. So once he does that, both sides are just sitting there. They're not really actively, fighting against each other. There's some small pickets, but there's nothing battle-wise. Lincoln tells George Meade that you need to move on Lee as soon as possible. And Lincoln, at this point in the war, was kind of to me, he was an overactive commander-in-chief. Like, he had his generals in the field, but he's still calling the shots. Maybe a bit too much for his role at this point, but Lincoln is the one who tells Meade he needs to go attack Lee and do it right now. So in the fall of 63, Meade launches an offensive against Robert E. Lee, which is rare for that point in the war because, if you know Lee's record up until this point, he's always been the one who's been attacking. Mm-hmm. So now this is the first time that he's really been attacked. So Meade attacks him in what's called the Bristow campaign. And we're talking in overarching glances over all this. You can have later podcasts about this stuff individually. But Meade eventually gets Lee to retreat a little bit further south of Washington. It's a Union victory in the campaign, but it's not really a decisive victory. It's just Lee ends up retreating. And Lee ends up retreating back to Orange Courthouse in Orange County and setting up his camp there. He says, I'm done for the year. He tells one of his generals somewhere in this time period that he feels he's too old to lead this army anymore because the constant fighting since the war broke out is really getting to him. So he feels he's too old. And once Lee retires to Orange County, Meade kind of sets up camp a few miles north of him. And Meade pretty much says, I'm done as well. He's done for the year. He's attacked Lee. He's made him retreat. He's defended Washington. He's good for the year. Let's go into camp for the winter and start planning for the next year. Mm-hmm. Well, Lincoln is not satisfied with that. Lincoln says you need to keep attacking Lee while he's down. He's not getting reinforcements. He's pretty much given up for the year. Go ahead and attack him. Make him, retreat. Make him surrender. Do what you can. So Meade starts organizing what's called the Mine Run campaign, in which he attacks him or launches an attack in, I think this is November of 1863. But nothing really comes of that. Meade's men are tired of fighting. Lee's tired of fighting, and both sides just basically end up going back to where they were.
Right.
So 63 ends with Lee wounded, but he's still fighting in the field. Meade won't pursue him, and Lincoln is not very satisfied at the end of 63 because, yes, he's had two victories at Chickamauga, at Gettysburg and Vicksburg, but he lost Chickamauga. And, here he is going into 1864, which is an election year, and Lee is still fighting. The Western Front is still very active and trending towards the South at this point. The Confederates have won a major battle at that point. So Lincoln knows that he needs to start 1864 on a strong note. He needs to take the narrative back because it's an election year. People in the North are getting tired of fighting this war. They're probably looking at ending it if things don't start turning around. So Lincoln again takes his role as commander-in-chief, I think a little too seriously, and he starts planning an attack himself. So Lincoln's plan is he's going to bring in a guy by the name of Judson Kilpatrick, Kilcalvary, as he's also known, and a guy by the name of Colonel Ulrich Dahlgren. And their plan is they are going to do a quick raid of Richmond. They're going to go down to Richmond from their post outside of D.C., go to the Belle Isle prison, free all the prisoners of war on Belle Isle, burn supplies, and head back up to D.C. as kind of a method, or the reasoning behind it is to show the South we can attack you in your capital city at any time we want. Like, you think that you're good, we can launch a raid into your capital city, free our prisoners, and come back, and you can't touch us.
In and out, quick 20-minute adventure.
Right. So that's Lincoln's plan. But Lincoln knows that Lee is camped kind of in between D.C. and Richmond. And if he tries to launch an offensive, that Lee can just shift his men and stop it. So Lincoln knows that he needs to create a diversion to take Lee's attention away from what's going on with Kilpatrick, and Lee needs to focus on the opposite side of the map. So Lee needs to focus west or south and not north or east where Kilpatrick is coming from. It's important to note here that Lee, he's camped in Orange Courthouse, but he has his lines stretched from Orange Courthouse south through Gordonsville and all the way down to Charlottesville. So he is stretched very thin. Mm-hmm. But he does that because Charlottesville is his main rail hub. There's the Virginia Central Railroad, which goes from Stanton to Charlottesville to Gordonsville to Richmond. So he's getting supplies from the valley through Charlottesville. So he stretches his line as thin as he can just so he can have access to Charlottesville. So Lincoln and Kilpatrick devised this plan that they are going to attack Charlottesville and burn the supplies that are there that have come into the train, cut the rail line so they can't get any more supplies, and so they can't defend Richmond, so Lee can't put his soldiers on trains in Charlottesville and move them to Richmond. Mm-hmm. So they're cut those lines, and they pick a young guy by the name of George Armstrong Custer to lead this diversion. So, Custer is a huge name both during but mostly after the Civil War. One of the speakers at the Third Winchester Convention several months ago said he's one of the most written about Americans in American history.
Yeah.
But yet, if you read any of his bios, you won't find this story in there because it's very embarrassing to him. So Custer is given 1,500 men, 1,500 cavalrymen, and he rides south and he stops at Stanardsville, and he engages with some Confederate skirmishers there, and he captures a few of them. And the skirmishers that he captures, they tell him that Confederate cavalry led by Fitzhugh Lee is camped out in Charlottesville, and that Custer needs to beware because he's getting ready to ride into a huge force. Well,
typical of Confederate prisoners to
right.
mislead.
So Fitzhugh Lee is not there, nor is the cavalry. So I don't know, if that was intentional deception or they just simply didn't know where people were in this stretched out line. But Custer has this idea that he's about to ride into this, hailstorm of cavalry, and it's going to be a huge battle. So he's prepping his men, and he knows that he needs to make a big splash in Charlottesville to attract Lee's attention, but more specifically, attract the attention of Jeb Stuart. Because if Custer is engaging with Jeb Stuart, then Jeb Stuart can't ride to Richmond and stop Kilpatrick. So Custer comes down. He's at Standardsville with 1,500 men, and he rides a little bit south to a place called Earlysville, which is where my wife's family currently lives, and they're camped out in Earlysville.
Any relation to Jubal?
Oh, nah, I don't. I don't think so. But I can tell you some stories about Jubal though.
For another episode.
Yeah, being from Southside Virginia. Anyway, Custer's camped in Earlysville, which is just north of the. Is it Ravenna or Rivanna River? I'm gonna call it the
Ravenna, I think is the
Ravenna,
the local dialect.
Yeah, so let's go with that. So he's just north of the river, and Charlottesville is on the other side. So he camps there in Earlysville, and Custer devises this plan to attack what he thinks is Fitzhugh Lee's cavalry. He says that I'm going to split my men up. I'm going to actually split them up into fourths. So he takes his 1,500 men, and he divides them by 4. And he said, I'm going to lead 2 prongs of this attack, and he gives command of the other 2 prongs to a guy by the name of Captain Joseph Ashe. So Custer says he's going to lead the west attack and the north attack. So he's going to attack Charlottesville from the west and the north. Ashe is going to ride around Charlottesville and attack the east and the south. So they're going to attack, essentially flank any force that's there. As Custer is drawing up the battle plans for this, keep in mind he's just a couple miles north of Charlottesville, he hears trains coming in and out. So he immediately thinks, oh crap, Fitzhugh Lee is getting, re-garrisoned, resupplied. And if we wait to do this any longer, we're going to be facing a full force, maybe something beyond cavalry. So I have to attack before he gets all of his reinforcements in here. So Custer hastily launches this attack. He rides across the Ravenna River, and he engages the Confederates that are camped there. Now, on Rio Hill, which is just north of Charlottesville, there are camped 200 Confederate artillerymen, not cavalry, artillery. So Custer's got 1,500 people. There are 200 artillerymen camped there. They're led by a guy by the name of Colonel Marcellus Moorman, who's a VMI graduate, class of 56 or 57. Of course, most leaders in the Civil War have some sort of VMI connection.
Right.
So Moorman gets these reports that there's a Union force that's moving on his position, and he needs to get into a defensive mode. Well, Moorman doesn't believe him. For whatever reason, Moorman says, I don't think this is true. It's winter. They shouldn't be attacking us. So he says, you know what? I'm going to do my due diligence so I can cover myself on this one. I'm going to send out a few guys to check the bridges to make sure that nothing's coming and that they're safe. And we'll just call it a day. So he sends a group of guys out. And from where he is to the river, it's probably maybe half a mile, somewhere between half a mile, 3/4 of a mile. So he sent this group out at noon. Half an hour later, they're coming back and saying that Custer has already crossed this bridge. The Federals have captured it. We're doomed. We need to set up right now because they're going to be here literally any second. So keep in mind, this is at noon. Custer didn't actually cross that bridge until 3 o'clock. I don't know what those guys saw. Maybe they phoned it in. Maybe they wanted a battle that bad. But they came back and said, we've already lost this bridge. The Federals have taken it. Keep in mind, this is in broad daylight. So, I don't know what they thought they saw. Maybe somebody wearing a Navy shirt or something was working the bridge, and they're like, oh, that's it.
Somebody had too much of that Bumgardner's whiskey.
Yeah. somebody was partaking of a bit Mr. J. Bumgardner's whiskey. So they run back and tell Mormon, we've got to set up a defensive position right now on top of this hill. So Rio Hill is about 200 feet above the river. And if you look at a topographic map, it rises up pretty quickly. I'd say within 150 yards, it goes from 400 feet elevation to 600. So, I mean, it's a pretty steep climb. Mm-hmm. So Mormon says, well, we don't really have time to establish the position that we need. So I'm going to leave some guns here at the bottom of the hill while I pull the rest of these up, because Mormon had 16 cannons. He had 16 guns. He said, I'm going to leave 3 or 4 here, but I'm going to pull everything up that I can to establish a position on the high ground that's 200 feet above where I am now. So he's pulling these cannons literally straight up a hill, which is an arduous task, on the best of days, cannons, caissons, everything.
Not lightweight.
Right, yeah. This is not an easy task. So these 200 men, they're working hard, and a couple hours into moving the guns, that they've moved about 11 or 12 of them. So they still have 3 or 4 down at the bottom. They look up, and now it is 3 o'clock, and Custer actually crosses the bridge. So Custer launches this attack across the bridge. The men at the bottom of the hill start firing these cannons at him. But keep in mind, they're cavalry, and they're fighting cannons. The cannons don't really do well against cavalry because they can move and cannons can't. So, they're firing the cannons as fast as they can go, but they're not inflicting any damage whatsoever to Custer because his men are literally just moving.
Are there any reports of the equipment of these artillerymen? Because I know sometimes artillerymen will have, aside from like a revolver, like a short musket or a carbine or something of that nature.
They had a few of them had pistols, and we'll actually get to that here in a second. But as far as like
that late in the war too,
yeah. As far as like armaments, they weren't fully armed. If they had anything, it would be smoothbore muskets.
That's rough.
So
that's rough.
But keep in mind, like this is the outskirts of Lee's. Like they are as far from Lee's headquarters as soldiers are at this point. Like they're literally on the outskirts of camp.
The B team,
right?
Literally,
they're there to literally guard a supply line. Like if Lee gets attacked, it's going to take them the longest to get there. So Custer comes across this bridge, and he's attacking this force. And Custer tells his men, because keep in mind, he's leading the west and the north attack. He says, as soon as we get across this bridge, let's form up here at a small area, and then we'll split, and then we'll go up this hill at the same time. Because, crossing the bridge, you get bottlenecked. Mm-hmm. So they cross the bridge, and apparently they're okay with doing this, even with cannons firing at them, because, apparently the cannons weren't that good, or the people manning them weren't very accurate. But no one's getting hurt, and Custer's not worried about getting hurt. So they ride away for a little bit, and then they split, and then they start this attack. Well, at the same time, Captain Joseph Ashe has led his men across a north bridge of the river, so on the north side of the hill, and he is circling around behind them. So Mormon has no idea that he's there because his attention is focused on Custer. His eyes are straight ahead, and he doesn't know there's soldiers coming in behind him. So I guess the 4 components of this get word, or they hear the battle charges of each other, and they all start to attack Rio Hill together. The shape of the hill, it's kind of like a banana. It's curved, and the people coming up the south end have a little bit of ways to go before they reach Mormon, but they're coordinated enough to attack this thing together. So Mormon's sitting on top of this hill with his 200 men now. There are about 12 guns up there because they didn't carry the rest of them up. And Mormon looks down and he sees 1,500 cavalrymen. He knows he's surrounded, and he knows he's about to get decimated because he has no way of escaping. He's literally surrounded on all sides. He has guns, so does he give up all 16 guns and run? Because that's going to be super costly. Or does he try to stay and fight the best he can with men who are pretty much unarmed? It was there that Mormon makes what I think is one of the funniest decisions of the Civil War. Boldest, but also funniest. Mormon takes every man that he can spare that's not manning a cannon or not necessary to fire a cannon, and he puts them on the horses that are pulling the cannons and the caissons. So keep in mind, these are not cavalry horses. These are cargo horses. These are not battle-trained horses. These are horses that are meant to pull things. And he tells the men on the horses, ride up and down the hill, and then once you go back on top of the hill, ride in circles. Just keep doing that as long as you can. So ride up the hill, ride down the hill. Once you get to the top of the hill, ride from one side to the other. And just keep repeating it. Well, Mormon's men tell him, well, what are we going to do about arms? Because we don't have anything to fire back with. Mormon hands them sticks.
Ooh.
So some of them have pistols, but most of them have sticks that they're holding like they would a rifle or a pistol as they're riding these horses. So as Custer is launching this attack, he sees these horses that are riding up and down the hill, and there's so many horses that he loses track of who is who, and he just sees horses riding up the hill, down the hill, across the hill. And Custer stops his attack because he's like, what the heck is going on? Like, this is Fitzhugh-Lee's cavalry. Like, I'm not prepared to fight this, so he halts his attack. Captain Joseph Ashe on the other side of the hill also sees this and is equally confused, but he doesn't stop his attack. So we have half the attack going from the south and the east, and they march up this hill, and they're kind of like dodging these horses that aren't firing at them. They're just riding up and down the hill. So they're just like, they're like, what in the world is going on? like, why aren't these guys firing us? And meanwhile, the cannons are still firing. There's a lot of smoke up there. And Ashe's men, who are again charging from the south and the east, they finally see troops and they start firing, but actually they're firing at each other. They're like, oh, somebody's firing, but they can't see because of all the cannon smoke. So they start firing right across. They're actually firing at their own men.
That's
insane. Like, I don't know how no one dies in any of this. So, like I said, Ashe's men are firing at each other. Custer's at the bottom of this hill here, totally spooked that Fitzhugh-Lee's cavalry is just taking over this skirmish. And he knows that he can't fight them because apparently they've been getting reinforcements by train from Charlottesville. Custer calls off this attack and says, nope, we are not doing this anymore. Like, this isn't worth it. My men are going to get slaughtered because the cavalry already has the high ground. We're going to pull out of here. Before Custer can get those orders to Ashe, somehow a caisson on top of Rio Hill explodes. Ashe's men think Mormon did it. Mormon thinks Ashe's men did it. Either way, they're all spooked. So Ashe's men retreat back down the hill. Mormon's men half retreat down the hill on the other side, and half of them are staying up there because they saw what happened. But once Ashe's men retreat down the hill, they ride back up and they meet up with Custer, and then they retreat north across the North Bridge, and Custer burns it so no one can follow him. So then he is now out of Charlottesville and he doesn't come back, all because of this, artillery colonel who tells his men just to ride the horses back and forth and hold these sticks.
So Custer fought, beat, and retreated from himself.
Correct. Fought, beat, retreated, and he retreated from men who were literally carrying sticks, riding horses that had never seen battle before. So, like, can you imagine? You
can't make it up.
Like, can you imagine being a horse in this? Well, there's somebody riding me now. But yeah, so Custer retreats across the river, burns the bridge so he can't be followed. Custer writes in his report that his men fought gloriously and he engaged the enemy on this hill, and he in his official report that's in the records still to that day thought it was Fitzhugh-Lee's cavalry. Like, he swore up and down, like, I engaged Fitzhugh-Lee's cavalry in Charlottesville.
Won't be convinced otherwise.
Yeah, he fought well. He just destroyed this bridge, which it wasn't the bridge they asked him to, but he destroyed a bridge. Mm-hmm. He destroyed this bridge. His men fought admirably, and he moved to Standardsville to a more strategic position. Mormon also wrote about this, and he said, basically, and this is my paraphrase, yeah, we lost some supplies. That was about it.
About it.
That was about
He's like, yep, that's about it. So Charlottesville now is no longer in danger. Custer has retreated to Standardsville again. So he not only rides past Earlysville, he goes all the way back to where he was the previous day. Well, this does draw the attention of Lee. Lee is aware that there is something going on, but Lee is smart enough to not send his full force. Lee also knows what Kilpatrick is doing because he hears reports that he's coming through Fredericksburg and coming down towards Richmond. So Lee is aware of Kilpatrick. So he doesn't commit to sending troops to Custer. So Custer failed in that regard. The next day, Custer would meet Jeb Stuart at Standardsville. And he would eventually be forced to retreat all the way back to Union lines. There wasn't a huge battle at Standardsville, but Stuart put enough pressure on him that he forced him to go all the way back to Union lines. So Kilpatrick, his raid fails terribly. He gets repulsed. Dahlgren gets killed, and that's the story of the Dahlgren affair, if you've ever heard that, where they find the papers that say they want to assassinate Davis and all that. But that's a different story for
Be another episode, episode in itself.
a different podcast episode. But the raid fails miserably. Keep in mind, this is February of 1864. I think Lincoln realizes at this point that he is no longer the one that needs to call the shots. And the very next month, actually a couple weeks later, he appoints a guy by the name of Grant to take over as general-in-chief because he knows that...
Given his track record, too, that's got to be frustrating to make this back-and-forth decision because he, early on with McClellan, I mean, I feel like that just made him a little skittish as far as trusting these commanders.
Right.
And then Grant just ends up paying off.
Right.
One thing that is an intrusive thought to me, and I know this is like totally irrelevant to the outcome of this engagement, but thinking about this, being that they're hauling horses, pack horses, whatever you want to call them, they probably didn't saddle them up. And I feel like it's probably quite the task to try to ride a larger horse uphill without a saddle, without falling off.
Right.
I feel like that's just an odd tidbit that just keeps standing out to me.
You know, and were these men even trained riders? Like, you know,
that had to have looked awkward. Had to have.
You know, had they ridden a horse anywhere outside their farm, you know?
Right.
And keep in mind, like I said, they're doing this all while cannons are firing. You know, there's smoke in the air. So you're trying to calm these horses and ride them, which they've never been ridden before.
Which is insane that there's no casualties involved in such a clumsy affair.
Yeah, no casualties. There was one Union soldier who was wounded when the caisson exploded, but it was not mortal. And 2 Confederates were captured because when the caisson exploded, everybody kind of ran everywhere.
Yeah.
So Custer grabbed 2 of them, but that's it.
That's interesting.
You would think with all the cannon fire that there was, with Union soldiers firing in the direction of each other, you know, we're in 64 now, so they have better weapons. Mm-hmm. That somebody would have hit something.
It makes you wonder if the artillery, I don't know if this is documented or not, if the artillery was just firing shells and solid shot, or if they had canister. You would think if they had canister, they would hit somebody.
Yeah, somebody's, you know, something, you know, pepper them somehow.
Yeah. But no casualty, as far as no deaths, no wound.
No casualties. The one wound came from that explosion and not anything else. You know,
That's crazy.
So, yeah.
So in your research, have you been able to find a lot of personal accounts by other troops involved? Or are you still surface level, hitting the ORs, hitting the big names there and those published sources, but is there still room to be able to dive deeper into those if it's documented?
Right. I think that the biggest struggle with this is it not being documented. I mean, Custer obviously doesn't want to talk about it. And if he found out any more, after the war about it, he definitely wouldn't want to talk about it because, here he is with 1,500 men being chased away by 200 men with sticks.
Sounds like an embarrassing blunder for both sides, something neither one would want to openly admit to.
It's very much surface level at this point. I haven't been able, and I'm not saying that there isn't, and if anyone listening knows any more about this or if they have this account in a diary somewhere, I would love to know more about it. All this is very, very much surface level, very much pieced together from Custer's somewhat inaccurate report. Mormon has a report of it, but it's It's not right after this that he's just writing down, oh yeah, this thing happened.
Superficial as well.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And I was gonna say, it's like we said, it's an embarrassing moment. So like, do you want that on your record?
Right. Neither one does. Yeah. Regardless of the outcome,
Right.
It's
So
embarrassing for both.
Do you want on your record that you were forced to retreat by 200 men, or that you fired cannon at all these, at 1,500 soldiers and you didn't hit a single one?
Yeah.
Like when that's your literal job.
Yeah. I wouldn't want to admit to either side. I think it's like both. Yeah. Both are awful. Yeah. But for those looking to visit the site today, unfortunately, I know you got some bad news here, but what does that look like today?
Yeah, this site has not been preserved at all. If you want to get somewhere very close to it, you can visit the Lowe's in North Charlottesville. Or there's a Rio Hill shopping center that at one time had a interpretive section about this battle. It's where the historical marker is today. So if you find the shopping center and you park towards the bottom of the lot, there is a state historical marker there that talks about this, but it says 2 or 3 sentences about it.
Yeah.
But as far as where things happened, you can still, or there's the location where the bridge was, where Custer crossed the river, is still there. It's on the Earlysville Road. So if you take Hydraulic Road and you turn on Earlysville Road, it's the first bridge you get to.
So it's not 29? Is that
No.
where 29 goes over? Okay.
29 would be close to where Rio Hill is now.
Okay.
Like where I think like I said, the shopping center is called Rio Hill Shopping Center or Rio Shopping Center or something. There at one time were mills there on the north side of the river, and they were called Rio Mills, which could be where it gets its name.
There is a road called Rio Mills Road.
Yeah. But if you want to go visit the site, that's about all there is. Other than the state historical marker, there's no Civil War trail signs out there yet. We are currently working on that, though. I've talked to Drew from Civil War Trails, and we're trying to find a good location to put a Civil War trail sign out there, but haven't found a great location for it yet that's would put somebody where the skirmish happened.
Yeah, I pulled up the core study map, and there's no core. So it's not one of those. It's not a battlefield recognized by the Park Service in their study that helps, facilitate the funds to preserve battlefield land. So, which is understandable when you're trying to study everything and draw important boundaries, and you look at the outcome of the battle, the size of the battle, what are the numbers, the stats. I can easily see why they didn't put a boundary around it, but that also hurts it. So the only way you could really preserve land, if there's anything left, is. But that's the thing too. There's no battle maps,
right?
So it's like you're just going off accounts to figure out where stuff happened. So that's art or archaeology,
which you can't do because it's
all developed.
Unless it was dug way back before
any
of that was
sad.
Put
it's
in
a
place.
Loss.
Yeah,
that sucks.
I mean, because there's no casualties, there's no clear-cut winner, and it's just kind of like they started and both like, never mind. So you can't really. There's nothing to go off of.
Yeah, the closest battlefield area boundary to this area is either Waynesboro in the valley or Trevilian Station.
Well, this is the only armed engagement in Albemarle County.
Correct.
Armed with sticks.
And it's hard. Yeah, if you even call it an armed engagement. I mean, cannons versus carbines, but
or half-armed.
Semi-armed, if you want to consider it that.
It's nuts.
Sticks versus rifles.
Yeah, you could. That should be your.
And that's the title.
We didn't even mention that. Jarred has an article. Oh, it's in your article. Duh. With Emerging Civil War. This was published posted on their website where you can find it. Basically, if you search up the skirmish at Rio Hill on Google, you'll find it. But it's the skirmish at Rio Hill, George Custer chased away by sticks. And this was by you, Jarred, on Emerging Civil War.
Right. And there's a picture that I posted in that article that comes from the Library of Congress of them burning the bridge as they left the area. But that's the
Which is actually pretty cool that there's even a sketch.
Right. Yeah.
It was something otherwise so overlooked.
Yeah, it was. I think that sketch was in Harper's Weekly, which was, the main periodical back then. So people back then would have at least known about, that bridge being burned and of Custer's activities. But as far as what happened on the afternoon of February 29th, 1864, I don't think too many people knew that he was chased by sticks.
Yeah, so now that's a resource that people, and it's it's not a massive article, which is great, but great for people that just want to dive a little bit deeper.
Yeah,
Quick tidbit.
You've got those images on there. So what, in your mind, what's your long term? What's if I can dive into the brain of Jarred the historian here, what are you hoping to do kind of with this? Because I know as a fellow historian, once you start researching a topic, you can just go deep and deep and deep and get lost in it. So what's the goal with this?
Well, now that the site can't be preserved, because I doubt you'll be able to talk a shopping center and Lowe's to out of giving up their property. But I think there's an advantage, but in a different way. Being that it is a shopping center and a place where people come on a daily basis for basic needs, it's a trafficked area. So if you could put my goal is to have some sort of signage out there, some sort of recognition of, hey, where you parked your car at, this happened. Because that's my biggest drive in history is like people drive by things every day. They, they see these things. They grew up, with going to these parks and stuff, but they don't really know the stories of what happened there. So if we could get some sort of signage, some sort of recognition saying, hey, you may be shopping here today, but if you were here 170 years ago, 170 years ago, on this day, this is what you would have seen. And right now, there's none of that, and I doubt that anybody who goes shopping there knows about it. And maybe a few people would stop and read, but hey, that's more than
you had before.
Yeah, more than before, and maybe that would spark somebody to say, hey, I grew up going shopping there. Like we come here a few times a month. Let's pull some more threads on this. So
yeah,
because right now, if there are other people out there researching it, please get in touch with me. But
save you some time.
Yeah, save me some time, especially since I don't live in the area. But
save you some gas. Yeah.
So, get the more people that are researching something, the more likely we are to find, somebody's diary entry that they were here this day, or somebody runs across, hey, my so and so grandpa wrote a letter, saying that he was part of the group that chased him away with the stick. So he was one of the ones that rode the horses. Like somebody's
it's out there somewhere.
Yeah, so somebody's got at least something somewhere on this. So if we can just get exposure, get other people pulling threads, that's my end goal.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So you all heard it. So if you've got connections or know people or know somebody that owns the Walmart or the Lowe's down in Albemarle County,
reach out to us.
Yeah, reach out to us. Reach out to Jarred. It's not. People think it's super easy to put an interpretive sign in on somebody's property, and just saying that out loud hopefully wakes people up to realize how ridiculous some people might sound when you go up to the person and say, "Let me put a sign here." But you got to do it because it's the right thing to do. So, I don't know. It's a different environment down there. It's a different beast of a request, but it's not impossible. And we know, I can safely assume that money wouldn't be an issue.
Right.
It would just be getting the proper channels,
right.
checked. And
if you own property in and around this area and you happen to be listening, or somebody that does, and they'll be willing to have a Civil War trail sign put in. From what I've been told, getting the sign is easy. Like that part's easy. Just finding a place to put it is the major holdup right now. So if we can find a place to put it there, or if any of your listeners know of a place, please let me know so we can get this in the ground soon, because wheels have been turning on this for a while. They just can't find the right door to knock on.
And this specific site and this specific engagement is a unique reminder, I would say, for the importance of preservation, because it's so vaguely documented, if at all, and the one key piece left to it, the ground that it actually took place on, is now, under parking lots and under businesses, and it's gone. So you've lost this site forever, and there's nothing you can do about it. And that serves as a good reminder as to why this is important to interpret in some capacity sites for the future, so that this doesn't happen again in a more important engagement than something that had no casualties or no significant outcome.
Right.
If anybody wants to shoot an email to Ned Galloway, he's the Board of Supervisors.
Yeah, send him
for
one.
guess what? The Rio district, which the battlefield is located in. So, Albemarle County, Virginia. This is where we're trying to get this moving. So, all it takes is a couple voices. And you can be really nice and just say, hey, let's put the sign up, and then that's all you got to do. So,
I think too. I mean, it would be I wouldn't say it'd be a tourist destination or anything, but if people are traveling, like the name George Custer is going to be a draw.
I mean, I'll tell you now, that's like the most visited page on the Battlefields Foundation's website.
Correct.
Your audience is there,
right?
So they're there.
Right.
That's the hard part's done. You just got to put it in front of their face.
Right. Yeah, if this was just Mormon and Joseph Ashe, I know those people are obviously important to their families, but, no one wants to drive out of their way to go see where Colonel Marcellus Mormon fired a cannon in Union Cavalry on this day. But
the average surface level historian doesn't care about that.
This is George Armstrong Custer.
Yeah.
Like I said, one of the most written about Americans. So if you know anything, or if you want to write your Board of Supervisors member.
Seriously, that's what it takes to get done. Jarred, is there anything else you want to add before we sign off?
Not really. I just glad to be here. Appreciate the work you guys are doing, getting these stories out there. It's a great place to for a story like me to have an outlet for some of this, because I can post it on the blog, and I love the folks there, but the people who read those blog posts are ones who are already invested in that stuff,
right,
or who subscribe to it, whereas this goes out to a wider audience. So I appreciate you guys letting me come and spend some time with y'all tonight, and
glad to have you.
Glad to have an outlet for this pulling threads research.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and
Thanks for the whiskey.
Coming back to Winchester. Yeah, thank you for the Valley whiskey, which is great. The Valley connection, also the Charlottesville Albemarle County connection. That this was great. So we always try to find those whiskeys and bourbons that have that tie-in, and this just happened. So was that purposeful, or did you know that?
Well, when
Ragged Branch was in Charlottesville,
when I grabbed the bottle, my first thought was obviously this is a really cool bottle, but then I flipped it over and started reading it, and I saw that it was distilled in Charlottesville. And I was like,
bingo.
I was like, I just wrote an article about Charlottesville.
Yes, you did.
So then I texted Elijah. I was like, dude, I have an idea.
Yeah.
So
here we are.
Perfect. Here we are.
Here we are.
Well, thanks again, Jarred. Thanks everybody for listening. If you like what you listen to, give us 5 stars, share with your friends, subscribe, whatever else they have to do, Elijah. Become membership. Become a member of the Battlefields Foundation. It's the end of the year. End of year giving. People are, for some reason, I haven't hit that point in my life yet where I'm like, it's the end of the year, I need to give away money. But there's people out there that are that are in that place. So if you're so inclined, please unload your cash into the Battlefields Foundation account. We're doing a lot of great projects, and also the Blue and Gray Education Society. Jarred represents them in some occasions, and so please become a member of them as well. Become a member of the Battlefields Foundation. All that in turn helps support this podcast. So thank you all for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Thanks, guys.